Hello and welcome to the Campaign Chronicles, France 24's regular countdown to the presidential election. Well, for that, I'm joined by our French politics editor, Mark Perriman. Hello, Mark.
Yeah.
And James Creedon. Hello, James.
Good evening,
You're
Tom.
going to be telling us all the latest reaction from the press and the blogs as well, James. Let's start by talking to you, though, Mark, because Labor Day here in France has taken on a decidedly political feel, has it not?
Absolutely. We're in between both rounds of the presidential election. Labor Day, there are some traditions, but today, interestingly, all the major players of the election took to the streets of Paris. Number one is the far-right leader, Marine Le Pen. She's been eliminated in round one, but she performed really well. And so she was celebrating the 600th anniversary of the birth of Joan of Arc, as the National Front does every year. But clearly, there was a lot of interest in what she would have to say. And she clearly was very happy to see that the National Front was now front and center of French politics, and that the people who voted for the National Front were not considered anymore as fringe lunatics, but as people who needed to be listened to, and she could only be ironic about that. And she also indicated that she would not favor any candidates for round two. Let's take a listen to Marine Le Pen earlier today in Paris.
My dear friends, how does it feel having been considered idiots for voting Marine Le Pen and now holding the balance of power in the presidential election? I will not trust or vote for either candidate. One of them wants his right-wing party to win, the other wants his left-wing party to win. But for 30 years, the two of them have made France a losing team. Sunday, I will not vote for either of them, and in June, I will vote for my party.
So Marine Le Pen indicated that she would vote blank, which is actually not considered a valid vote here in France, and she's indicating that she doesn't want her voters to support François Hollande or Nicolas Sarkozy. However, it should be noted that in her speech, she attacked Nicolas Sarkozy in a much more violent way than François Hollande, and this could indicate that Marine Le Pen is already looking ahead because there are presidential election next Sunday. But in a month from now, there'll be parliamentary election, and she's hoping that her National Front can play a big role and make sure she blows the Conservative Party of Nicolas Sarkozy into pieces. So we have to watch for that. In the meantime, we had the second traditional event on Labor Day here in France. The unions were demonstrating today. They always do. But this year's tone was decidedly more political than previous ones, obviously because we're in between the two rounds of the presidential election, but also because there's been a lot of tension between Nicolas Sarkozy, the president, and the unions. And we had today one of the union leaders, the CGT, which is the communist-backed union, clearly called for a vote for François Hollande. And another union leader we're going to listen to, François Chirac from the CFDT, did not go as far, but explain why there were so many tensions between the president and the unions.
I think people were provoked by what was said by the president. They were irritated by what he said about real work, and there's been a strong response. It's good that all these people have come to march with their unions.
So François Chirac was alluding to Nicolas Sarkozy speaking recently of real work. He backtracked actually because this infuriated the union, and even within his own camp there was some discomfort about using real work. What is a real worker compared to?
People were saying real work as opposed to what? As opposed to false work?
Well, he was meaning people who were essentially on welfare. He backtracked, but however, this was the occasion for him to stage the third big political event, which is totally unusual, a big rally in the middle of Paris for a real Labor Day. In the end, that's how it was dubbed. But clearly, Nicolas Sarkozy is furious with the unions, and he wanted his supporters also to be hearing from him about how the unions were playing politics and how dangerous it was and how it needed to be attacked. Let's take a listen to Nicolas Sarkozy today.
They chose to march with the red flag. We have chosen to rally behind the French flag. I say to the unions, leave aside the parties that you support today, because they won't do the same. Put aside the parties Your place has nothing to do with politics. Leave aside the parties, because your role is not to defend an ideology. Your role is to protect employees and jobs. Remember this, do not betray your mission.
All right, so Nicolas Sarkozy speaking there at what you just called a big rally, Mark. But James, my question to you is how big? Because there is some dispute, is there not? It's just what the turnout was like.
That's right. Let's take a look on Twitter at people picking that figure of 200,000 attendees apart. Now, Nicolas Sarkozy on his Twitter page, you can see it here, said, this 1st of May, we had a slight hesitation there, 200,000 people to celebrate Labour Day. And you can see there a photo of Place Le Trocadero, which does indeed look very, very full. Now, some were saying 200,000 people at this in Trocadero Square, or Trocadero, Place Le Trocadero, not possible. They must have all been old people still counting in francs. They should just divide by 6.55, whatever that was, the old exchange rate. And actually, I noticed something before I came on air. There were comments on that. I can't actually pull them up right now, but people actually saying if you divide by 6, it was probably quite close to the capacity of Place du Trocadero. So it started off being a joke, but might have been accurate. Now, elsewhere, people saying that you would have had to be 9 people per square metre to actually fit into Trocadero with the UMP party figures, which is, let's just say, impossible, right? Here is somebody actually doing the calculation. That's, of course, not verified, but it shows on Twitter, online, the way people are questioning those figures. You also have on Media Part, a website that is known to be very anti-Nicolas Sarkozy, this headline here saying, yes, in fact, there were 200,000 people at Trocadero to support Sarkozy, and this is how they did it. And you can see here them training, standing on each other's shoulders. Just quickly to point out that is the same website that questioned the figures for Nicolas Sarkozy's rally at Place de la Concorde the weekend before the first round, where he said 100,000 people turned out. And through aerial maps showing areas that were cordoned off here where no one could assemble, and photos taken on the day showing vast empty spaces, they said, look, actually about 25,000 people were there, not 100,000. So
yeah, it's interesting because both campaigns are manufacturing their images. They give it to the TV stations, and so it's very difficult because they obviously choose the most favorable angles to show crowds of people, lots of enthusiasm, but it's very difficult to figure out. And the police doesn't give any figures. They give about demonstration, but not about political rallies, probably trying to be cautious politically.
But you'd have thought they'd have the forethought to kind of work out roughly beforehand what the likely parameters were, because if 200,000 simply cannot fit in a square, there's no point saying...
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you do see headlines in the media this afternoon, and people did just repeat that figure. They just, Sarkozy says 200,000, that's the headline.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's a lot about Nicolas Sarkozy. Let's go back to François Hollande, who took an altogether different approach to May Day, did he not?
Yes, he decided to go to Nevers in central France to honor the memory of Pierre Bérégovoy, who was a former prime minister who committed suicide exactly 19 years ago. He was suspected at the time of having benefited from a loan, which turned out to be untrue, but he took his own life. And so François Hollande wanted to be seen as someone who was being maybe more dignified, more presidential, not immediately on the ring fighting. However, he did hold an improvised, or maybe not so improvised, rally in which he explained why he thinks Labor Day should be about people who work, whether it's real or not.
I want to remember the reason for this Labour Day. It shouldn't be about discord or division. On the contrary, it should be about unity. That's what distinguishes me from the incumbent. He divides, I unite.
Okay, François Hollande speaking there. And just before we go, some latest poll figures. How are the two frontrunners doing?
The frontrunners are, there is clear advantage for François Hollande. According to the latest IFOP, they have a daily rolling poll, as they call it, 53.5% of voting intentions. Nicolas Sarkozy, 46.5%. It's a little bit tighter. Another poll showed 53-47. Yesterday, it's a little bit tighter than in previous days. However, it's still a clear advantage for François Hollande. When Nicolas Sarkozy won soundly back in 2007 against Socialist Ségolène Royal, it was 53-47. It's likely that the gap is going to narrow as people make up their minds. However, it's still a major, major challenge for Nicolas Sarkozy because he needs the people who voted for Marine Le Pen as well as centrist voters, and it's a tough balancing act. He's been trying to perform it. He has 5 more days, I should say, to pull it off.
Let's see what he can manage to do in that time. Thank you very much indeed, Mark Perelman. Thank you, James, for bringing us all the latest from online. And remember, you can follow the entire French presidential campaign on our website. We've got a special section there dedicated to the elections. Participate as well in polls, and you can also see what hot topics are coming out of the social networks. All there on France24.com. Thank you very much indeed. That was the Campaign Chronicles.